When my younger brother Lane sent me a message that said, "Don't come to the barbecue," I stared at my phone for a long time. I thought he was playing around. I had hosted that gathering for years. It was the one day our scattered family came together. But his words were real, and they hit harder than anything I expected. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I am Tara, the older sister who raised Lane after our parents fell apart. I stood by him, helped him through school, helped him find his first job, and even brought him into the small company I built from nothing. My wife, Reese, always said Lane felt like a little brother to her too. I believed that bond was honest. A week before the barbecue, everything felt strange. Lane stopped answering my calls. Reese kept stepping away to take private phone conversations. When I entered a room, both of them went quiet. I tried to brush it off, but a heavy feeling stayed with me. One night, I heard Lane on the phone in the hallway saying, "She won't show up. We will handle the rest on Sunday." That was when I knew something was wrong. I checked my business accounts and found money missing. Documents in Lane's name were funded with my company's funds. Reese had approved the withdrawals. I said nothing. I met with my attorney, secured my ownership, and gathered every piece of proof. On Monday, Lane and Reese walked into my office expecting control. Instead, they faced the truth. They lost everything they tried to take. I walked away steady, choosing peace over anger. My quiet revenge was simple. I stopped saving people who never planned to save me. When our parents split, everything in our home fell apart overnight. I was still young, but I understood that Lane needed someone steady, someone who would not leave. So I stepped into a role I never asked for. I became the one who made sure he ate, finished schoolwork, and had clean clothes for the next day. While other kids spent afternoons outside, I worked part-time jobs to keep us afloat. Lane depended on me for rides, guidance, and every difficult decision he faced. When he struggled with grades, I stayed up late helping him. When he felt lost, I pushed him forward, even if it meant putting my own plans aside. I carried his worries, his mistakes, and his fears because I believed that was what a sister was supposed to do. Our mother was rarely present, drifting between temp jobs and new relationships. Our father moved across the country after the divorce, sending promises that never turned into visits. That left Lane looking only in my direction when he needed stability. I became the person he trusted, the one constant he could count on. As the years went by, I kept choosing him over myself. I passed up college opportunities so he could stay in the same school. I worked double shifts so he would not feel the weight of our family's problems. I told myself that every sacrifice would help him grow into someone strong and grateful. Even when he made reckless choices, I shielded him from the consequences. I talked to teachers, covered small debts he created, and eased tension whenever he got into trouble. I thought I was building a bond that nothing could break. I thought he understood how much I had carried for him. I never imagined that loyalty would one day be used against me. Married life with Reese felt steady in the beginning. She came into my world when everything finally seemed calm, and she often said she admired how I held my family together. She told me she respected the bond Lane and I shared, and she made an effort to fit into that space without pushing too hard. I believed her when she said Lane made her feel included. I believed her when she said she loved how close we all were. Reese would sit with him during dinners, asking about his day, his goals, and his plans. She acted as though she understood the history Lane and I carried. She reminded me often that she cared for him like a younger brother, and I appreciated what I thought was genuine kindness. When Lane needed advice, she stepped in with suggestions. When he made mistakes, she brushed them off with a soft tone, claiming he meant well. Because she treated him warmly, I let my guard down. I trusted that she saw the years of work behind our family and respected the role I had played. I trusted that she stood beside me as a partner who valued loyalty. I believed her support came from a good place, not because she wanted something from him or from me. When small decisions in our home involved Lane, I never questioned her intentions. If she offered to handle something for him, I felt relief rather than suspicion. If she spent extra time with him, I thought she was simply trying to help. Looking back, I realize how easily trust can be misplaced. I thought I was building a balanced home, one where loyalty flowed both ways. I didn't see the quiet shifts happening between them, the small choices that would later form a pattern. I didn't imagine their closeness could ever turn into a danger to me. The annual barbecue was something I created long before life became complicated. It started during a summer when money was tight and spirits were low, and I wanted Lane to have at least one day each year that felt warm and steady. Over time, it turned into a tradition that relatives looked forward to and neighbors asked about. I planned every detail myself. I handled the food, gathered supplies, arranged seating, and made sure everyone had enough to eat. I paid for it without thinking twice because it brought people together in a way nothing else did. Lane always said that day gave him a sense of belonging he rarely felt anywhere else. He would arrive early to help set up tables or carry coolers from the garage. Seeing him smile while people filled the backyard convinced me that the effort was worth it. I wanted him to have something familiar to come back to each year, something solid when life around us felt unpredictable. What made the event special was not the menu or the decorations. It was the atmosphere. I tried to create a space where family tensions were left at the gate and everyone could relax without worrying about the past. Children ran around the yard, older relatives shared quiet conversations, and the sound of laughter filled the long summer evening. Even Reese said it felt like a reminder of simpler times, and she often encouraged me to keep the tradition going. Preparing for it took weeks of planning. I checked weather updates, cleaned the yard, and made lists that grew longer with every passing day. I never complained because I believed the gathering mattered. It represented everything I tried to build: comfort, consistency, and connection. I never imagined that something I poured so much heart into could be turned into a moment that cut so deeply. The morning that message arrived, I was going over the last list for the gathering. The grill supplies were set, the backyard was cleaned, and I had already arranged pickup for the food. Then my phone buzzed with a short line from Lane telling me not to come. There was no explanation, no hint of concern, just a sudden barrier placed between us. For a second, I thought he had sent it by mistake, but the tone was too clear to ignore. I tried calling him right away. The first call rang until it cut off. The second went straight to voicemail. The third time, the line connected for a moment before going silent and ending abruptly. Each attempt made the disbelief grow heavier. This event had always been something I created for everyone, especially for him, and now he was telling me I had no place there. I turned to Reese, hoping she could offer something that made sense. She looked genuinely puzzled, or at least she tried to appear that way. She lifted her hand slightly and said she had no idea what could have caused such a message. When I asked her to try calling him from her own phone, she hesitated before saying he wouldn't pick up for her either. Her expression stayed calm, but something in her voice felt too controlled, as if she was choosing each word carefully. The more I reached out, the more it became clear I was being shut out on purpose. No mistakes, no mix-ups, no explanations. Just silence where there had always been connection. Hours passed, and there was still no response from him. Not even a simple clarification. Being pushed away from something I had built piece by piece felt unreal. It was as if someone had taken the ground I depended on and pulled it out from under me, leaving nothing but a cold, hollow question: why? In the days before everything fell apart, the atmosphere in my home shifted in a way I couldn't ignore. It started with small changes, the kind that are easy to overlook if you want life to feel normal. Lane stopped dropping by with his usual energy. Instead of sharing updates or asking for advice, he kept his visits short and his eyes elsewhere. When he spoke, his answers felt clipped, as if he was holding something back every time he opened his mouth. Reese's behavior changed as well. She began taking calls in the hallway or outside on the porch, lowering her voice until it became nothing more than a faint murmur. When I asked who she was talking to, she gave vague answers that never explained much. She moved through the house with a strange tension, as if she was waiting for a moment I hadn't been told about. What bothered me most was how often conversations ended the second I walked into a room. I'd hear soft voices, a laugh, or hurried footsteps, and then everything would go silent. Lane would glance at Reese, Reese would glance at Lane, and both of them would suddenly look busier than before. That uneasy stillness filled every corner of the house, pressing against me like a warning I couldn't decipher. Meals became quiet. Evenings, once full of easy chatter, turned into long stretches where no one said much. I noticed doors closing quickly, messages being cleared from screens, and glances exchanged when they thought my back was turned. Each moment added to a pressure I couldn't name, a slow tightening around my chest. It felt like I was watching a storm gather in slow motion, sensing the danger but not yet seeing the shape of it. And the closer the barbecue came, the heavier that feeling grew, as if something important had already shifted without my knowledge. I wasn't looking for answers that night. I had walked down the hall simply to grab a glass of water, hoping it might calm the uneasy feeling that had settled inside me. As I neared the living room, I heard Lane's voice. It was low, urgent, nothing like the casual tone he usually used during late calls. I was about to step in and let him know I was there when one sentence froze me in place. She won't show up. We'll handle the rest on Sunday. The words were sharp, whispered with a confidence that held no doubt. He wasn't guessing. He was certain. And the certainty in his voice pierced through me like a cold blade. I stayed still, barely breathing, listening as he continued speaking in hushed tones. I couldn't make out the rest, but the damage was already done. That single line revealed more than a full explanation ever could. Sunday was the day of the barbecue. The day I had planned for weeks. The day I was suddenly being pushed away from. Hearing him speak as if my absence was part of a plan made my skin prickle. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a moment of frustration. It was preparation, something being arranged without me, around me, and possibly against me. I stepped back quietly, my mind racing. The strange behavior, the sudden silence, the closed doors, it all clicked into place with a clarity that made my stomach churn. The distance had not been accidental. The whispers had not been harmless. There was something moving beneath the surface, something calculated. I returned to my room with a heavy stillness inside me. I didn't confront him. I didn't ask questions. Instead, I let the truth settle. Whatever was happening, it involved more than a single message or a sudden mood. And the real meaning of his words was clear, they were preparing for something I was never meant to see. I waited until the house was quiet before I sat down at my desk. I needed clarity, something solid to balance the unease that had settled over me. I opened the business accounts I shared with Reese, expecting the usual steady numbers. Instead, I found gaps, amounts missing without any project tied to them. They weren't large enough to trigger alerts, but they were consistent, spaced out, and recent. Each withdrawal had the same approval trail. Every single one carried Reese's authorization. She hadn't mentioned any of it. There were no new contracts, no emergency expenses, nothing that explained why money was leaving the accounts so quietly. A dull pressure filled my chest as I scrolled through the entries, watching the totals shift in a pattern that made too much sense once I looked closely. I opened the company's internal files next, searching for anything that connected to the dates of the withdrawals. That was when I stumbled across a folder I didn't recognize, buried between project documents. Inside were scanned forms tied to a property purchase. The buyer listed was Lane. The timeline matched perfectly with the missing funds. The down payment, the fees, every step aligned with the amounts pulled from my accounts. My hands felt cold as I read through each page. Lane didn't have the resources to make that purchase on his own. He had never mentioned owning anything. And yet here it was, his name printed cleanly on documents paid for by money that had disappeared under Reese's authorization. I leaned back, letting the pieces fall into place one by one. The silence. The message. The call. The shift in their behavior. None of it was random. They had been moving in coordination, and I had been left in the dark while they worked together behind my back. The truth was no longer hidden. Something I built, something I trusted, was being taken apart by the two people I relied on most. Once the documents were in front of me, the truth came into focus with a clarity that left no room for doubt. The missing money, the whispered conversations, the sudden coldness, none of it stood alone. Every detail pointed in the same direction, forming a line straight to a plan I had never been meant to discover. Lane and Reese were not acting separately. Their choices were too aligned, too deliberate, too well-timed to be coincidence. I began tracing back recent meetings and remembered the investor I had introduced them to months earlier. He had shown interest in expanding our work and mentioned wanting to explore new leadership ideas. At the time, I thought nothing of it. I simply wanted to give Lane an opportunity to grow and allow Reese to take on a larger role. I had trusted them both enough to bring them into the room with me. I didn't realize that moment would become the entry point for something else. As I reviewed messages and scheduled appointments, I found gaps that matched the investor's availability. There were meetings arranged without my knowledge, times when both Lane and Reese had been absent with excuses that now felt rehearsed. They had used those moments to build a narrative, one that pushed me out of the center of the business I had created. They had positioned themselves as the future while quietly setting the stage to remove me. The most painful part was understanding how they had chosen the barbecue for their final push. While I was kept away from the gathering I had hosted for years, they planned to meet with that same investor, ready to present themselves as the new leadership. The tradition that once symbolized unity had been twisted into a cover for their actions. It wasn't just about money. It wasn't just about a company. It was the realization that loyalty I thought was unbreakable had been turned into a tool to edge me out of my own life's work. I didn't confront either of them the night I uncovered everything. Anger would have given them time to adjust. Silence gave me room to act. I waited until the sun came up, then went straight to my attorney. I laid out the financial records, the authorization trails, and the property documents I had found. He listened carefully, then advised strengthening the control structure of the company before anyone else made a move. We spent hours reviewing every detail of the partnership agreements, searching for openings I could reinforce. By midday, new clauses were drafted that shifted full decision-making power back to me. They were legal, binding, and ready to be filed. Once signed, no one could alter the direction of the business without my approval. It was protection I should have secured long ago, but now it became the foundation of my next steps. I returned home and began building a file that documented everything. I printed each withdrawal notice, organizing them in order. I saved screenshots of authorization stamps that didn't match past records. I compared signatures on recent documents to older ones and noticed inconsistencies, curves, slants, pressure points. The more I reviewed, the clearer it became that some signatures had been added without my knowledge. On top of that, I found internal emails showing decisions made in my name that I had never approved. Small changes, subtle adjustments, all pointing to a quiet attempt to shift power. Each piece went into a folder until the evidence formed a complete picture of coordinated sabotage. Not once during this process did I speak to Lane or Reese. I avoided their questions, kept my tone steady, and acted as though nothing had changed. My calmness protected the work happening behind the scenes. While they planned their next move, I prepared mine with careful precision. When everything was ready, I finally felt the solid ground return beneath my feet. I had the truth, the documents, and the legal strength to face. Monday arrived, and I felt a strange calm as I waited in my office. The air was quiet, the kind that seems to hold its breath before something breaks. I had arranged everything the night before, stacks of documents, folders neatly labeled, and my attorney beside me, ready for what was coming. Each file contained proof, evidence, and the authority I had reclaimed over the company. Every piece of paper told a story Lane and Reese could no longer deny. When the door opened, they walked in with the confidence of people who believed they had already won. Lane's shoulders were squared, and Reese's smile was smooth, practiced. They didn't notice the folders, the quiet presence of counsel, or the air of controlled authority in the room. They assumed this would be a simple formality, a step in a plan they thought was already complete. I stayed seated, letting them settle before speaking. My voice was steady, calm, and measured as I explained that the company's control rested solely with me. I opened the folders and began outlining each piece of evidence: forged signatures, unauthorized withdrawals, and decisions made without approval. Their expressions shifted, confusion flickering across faces that had been so sure moments before. Lane's confidence faltered when I highlighted the property documents and tied them to missing funds. Reese's composure cracked as I presented her approvals in writing. Each fact landed like a stone in water, rippling across the room and washing away the certainty they had walked in with. By the time I finished, neither of them spoke. They realized that every plan they had relied on was undone. The moment they expected to finalize their control became the moment their strategy collapsed entirely. I didn't need to raise my voice, threaten, or yell. Silence, preparation, and truth had done what confrontation never could. The consequences hit faster than they could have imagined. Once the evidence was presented, the board acted immediately. Reese was stripped of any authority in the company and barred from accessing accounts. Her role was terminated, and an investigation into her financial activity began. The auditors traced the missing money back to her approvals, leaving no room for excuses or delay. Lane's situation unraveled just as quickly. The property he had believed was his became a legal burden. The bank discovered the funds used for the purchase had come from unauthorized withdrawals. The documents he thought gave him ownership were invalid. He faced the reality that his name on the paperwork meant nothing without proper funding, and that funding had been taken without permission. Both of them confronted the weight of accountability. Legal notices followed, and they were forced to answer for the choices they had made. The quiet manipulation, the whispered conversations, and the carefully planned moves that had seemed clever now left them exposed. There were no shortcuts, no way to cover their tracks. Every action they had taken came back with precise, unavoidable force. Watching it unfold was strange. I didn't feel triumph in anger or relish in revenge. I felt the calm satisfaction of justice taking its course. What they had attempted to claim through deceit was erased, and they could no longer interfere with the work I had built. By the end of the week, the company was secure under my direction. The property reverted to legal oversight, and Lane and Reese were left to face the reality they had created. Their fall was complete, and it was not sudden in spite, it was inevitable because of the choices they had made while underestimating the consequences. After everything settled, I spent the following weeks restoring balance to my life and the company. I focused on projects I had set aside, reconnected with reliable partners, and rebuilt the routines that had been disrupted. There was no need for confrontation or public humiliation. I didn't need to make noise to prove a point. My work, my consistency, and my results spoke louder than anger ever could. I watched as Lane and Reese dealt with the aftermath of their own choices. I didn't interfere. I didn't call, argue, or try to convince anyone of their missteps. Their decisions had consequences, and I let them unfold naturally. There was no gloating, no satisfaction in seeing them falter. The quietest form of victory was letting them face reality while I continued forward. My focus shifted entirely to growth, both personal and professional. I invested in ideas that had been on hold, strengthened my company's foundation, and nurtured relationships built on trust rather than convenience. Each step forward reinforced the sense of control I had regained, and each success reminded me that loyalty must be mutual to endure. The quiet revenge wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't about revenge parties, confrontations, or public exposure. It was simple: I no longer carried their burdens. I no longer shielded them from the results of choices they made knowing the risk. I thrived on my own terms, steadily and with confidence, building a life and a company that no one could take from me. In the end, my strongest statement wasn't a punishment, it was my independence. Lane and Reese had believed I couldn't manage without them. My quiet revenge proved the opposite: I could, I did, and I would continue to rise without them in my life.